year actually, but this month in particular, we've been talking about unstatus quo. This idea that we can get stuck in old habits and old viewpoints and just not expand into where do we need some course correction? Where do we need to think in a bigger way? Question often comes up directed to me. We're talking to members of this community or others, or on the national level, of why aren't more people attracted to this philosophy? Why aren't we just getting all these excited folks tuning into this philosophy, this teaching, this plan for how to make life work? It seems so obvious to us that are practicing it, and we still get to call ourselves the best kept secret, you know? So my answer to that question when people ask, and maybe it's a little bit flippant, but I think there's a core of truth in it, is our teaching requires real thinking. Our teaching requires taking responsibility for our consciousness and choosing to do whatever work we personally find necessary to deepen that consciousness into the connection that we're yearning for. We don't just accept somebody else's answers. We don't. One of my favorite ways of explaining it is we teach people how to think, not what to think. And that feels really good to me, but a lot of people, no, just tell me what to think and let me relax and be with that and I'm fine. So what we try to offer here just isn't tempting to those folks. And the path they're on is working for them. So it's not like I'm saying, wow, are they messed up? They ought to wake up and come on in here. But it's different. It's different than what we are choosing to dive into for ourselves. But you know what? That same kind of, I don't want to think about it, can kind of sneak in to our own centers, into our own communities, into our own ways of practicing the tools that we have, that we call the science of mind. And that's kind of why we're spending this whole month poking at the places where we're just happy being status quo, and maybe we need to shake it up, maybe we need to poke it a little bit, maybe we need to wake up to something a little more unstatus quo. And if that sounds like it might be uncomfortable, well, you know, it might be. Stretching can be uncomfortable, but boy, can it be worth it. So what if we're willing to help ourselves and each other in that kind of stretch? What if we were willing to look at some of those places that maybe we weren't willing to look quite so clearly and attentively at what we are thinking about ourselves and each other and all those folks out there and the planet? What if we were willing to ask the questions, to do the work? So I think that is really true of today's topic, that whole thing of wholeness and disability, and how those two don't seem to be coherent. They don't seem to resonate with each other. Well, it's one of those paradoxes. For starters, you know I like to call paradox one of the places where spirit and human get to play with that kind of doesn't make sense. Okay, well here's one right here, wholeness and disability. So let's try to get some clarity here, okay? I want to point out that the overriding inner truth of that oneness that we call God or Spirit or whatever name you want to give the infinite love, infinite mind, infinite one, the overriding inner truth of that oneness is wholeness. That's its nature. It is the whole, right? And, here's the paradox, and that wholeness shows up in our physical world as all these unique expressions of itself. And if they're going to be unique, that means they're going to look a little bit separate and different from each other. And looking at the human definition of wholeness, pretty much right out of the gate, that's not whole, is it? I'm lacking something. I got all this stuff over here that's me, but I lack this other thing that's not me. That doesn't look like wholeness by a human definition. But it's still God's definition, because God sees the whole and your unique part in it as your unique part as fulfilling the wholeness. The wholeness wouldn't be whole if you weren't in it being exactly who you are. No exceptions. The divine being itself as you, right where you are, right what you are, right how you are, is your contribution and expression of the wholeness. And anytime we label that as less than or not enough or missing something, well, that's our humanness at work. Because humans like to judge. That's another talent we've been given. And if we're going to accept it all as whole, that even the judgment is inside the whole that is God. But divine love, in its bigness, doesn't judge. It just loves. We're the ones that pick and poke and point and judge. Okay? The oneness doesn't label things. It just loves. The oneness includes. That word inclusivity. The oneness doesn't need to be taught how to do that. That's what it is. The oneness simply loves us exactly as we are. Ernest Holmes, founder of this teaching, author of The Science of Mind, in a book called Spiritual Awareness, he put it this way. He said, every person represents an individualization of universal wholeness. The love, peace, joy, and freedom of spirit. We understand that the power of the Spirit expresses through every atom of our being now, this moment. As I said, no exceptions. Human judgment would say, but wait a minute. But we're relaxing from that and being willing to let Spirit hold us in its knowing of our wholeness. Eric Butterworth also, in his book, The Creative Life, he said, you are a perfect idea in the infinite mind. You are whole now. This wholeness is the only way the universe knows you. Okay, now if I had read that sentence 20 years ago, I might have taken it to the either or of, I'm feeling something damaged or missing or disabled, but the universe is knowing me as whole. That means the universe isn't seeing that damaged part of me. That's not what it means at all. It means the universe is seeing all of it and loving it and saying that's part of the wholeness. See the difference there? It's not excluding anything. It's absolutely loving it all, including it all. Now, that's not always easy for our human minds to lean into and allow. We take great pleasure in some of our judgment. You know, it gives us a sense of knowing where we're at. It's worth the work. It's worth the easing up and letting go and surrendering into a bigger idea. And it's different than denying the facts of physical challenges that we may be facing. Now, when I say I didn't quite grasp that 20 years ago, it still can be a touchy one for me. I think I'm a little bit oversensitive to it, thanks to an upbringing that included a mother and sister who had trained in Christian Science. And the Christian Science model is to achieve a true full healing of whatever is in front of you. You really do have to deny the physical, totally. You got to call it matter. You got to call it error. You got to not look at it and only turn toward the spiritual. And you know what? If you practice it really, really hard, that can work. And it's not the wholeness I'm talking about here. Ernest didn't say don't look at it. He did say that's not where the power is. That's a fact. And the power is within you in the spiritual sense, in the way your mind chooses to create the story you're telling yourself about the reality that you want to be living in. It's a little bit different. Again, it takes work, it takes practice, it takes discernment, it takes a willingness to embrace paradox. And it takes a willingness to love the person that you see as different, that might be in your face telling you something you don't want to hear about the way they believe things work. Again, it's the task at hand. It's the work we got to do. Because one of the things I value most about the science of mind is the way we honor the way spirit is showing up in every human being. We honor the ways spirit is showing up in our bodies, even when it's not perfect in the human definition of what a perfect body ought to look like or feel like or function like. We honor the bodies we're in. A quote from Ernest in The Science of Mind. Your body is entitled to your respect. Okay? Thank you for being my body. Thank you for serving me. Thank you for even the joints that don't work quite so smoothly as they did when I was younger. Thank you for what I see in the mirror that doesn't look like when I was 15. Honor our bodies. Love ourselves right where we are. And as Linda pointed out, as we get better at this idea of inclusivity when it comes to race and gender and all those other ways of human expression that we are learning that we have excluded, and if we want to be a human family, guess what? We got to learn how to include and to take that whole ability and disability into and under that umbrella and start working it. And maybe it's kind of a last frontier. No, they'll come up with more frontiers. They will continue to come up with other implanted ways of thinking about things that we didn't even realize we were just running on autopilot. It's evolution. That's what we're doing here. We get to notice as we embark on this idea of inclusivity that people in bodies that don't look like the norm, people with mental capabilities or processes that don't function like the norm are within the wholeness that we're going to get to learn how to include. Reverend Casey pointed out to me this morning all of the notes for what we could talk about this morning were all about physical disability and didn't address mental conditions at all. Interesting. Another frontier. What if we got better at looking at not needing slides to tell us, thank you for the slides, they're great slides. And what if we already knew that and operated that way? And what if we started celebrating some of the differences that show up in disability as amazing gifts to our society? Great quote from Greta Thunberg, that young woman who has done so much in climate activism. She says, I have Asperger's, which means I'm sometimes different from the norm. Given the right circumstances, being different is a superpower. What? Because the norm is all in the boat that we don't want to rock. And maybe we gotta rock the boat. Maybe, just maybe, if something new is gonna happen, we gotta rock the boat. And along with celebrating those gifts, we gotta show some compassion for the places where that disability does kind of bump up against everything that we've built that only supports the norm. Great case in point, great metaphor for everything we need to start reframing. That amazing pedestrian bridge here in Oklahoma City. How many years did it take them to build it over Northwest Expressway right at Wilshire, so that people don't have to cross all that traffic for the walking trail over to more walking trails? When they were building it, and I'm looking at, they got stairs that would be great fun to climb for exercise, but they also got these ramps going up. But I'm looking at the ramps, and it's like, now wait a minute. That's a ramp? I don't think so. And they got all the way done with it and had, woohoo, it's open. And somebody else other than me said, wait a minute, look at that ramp. That's not to code. Of course it's not to code, it's impossible. And they were back to the drawing board. After all the years and all the bazillion dollars, they were rebuilding so that it was to code. I would say that that code is in place as an element of compassion, common sense. This is about access. Don't build a ramp and say, look at, we build a ramp, but make it inaccessible. Impossible. If those steps, that yes, it would be a huff and puff for me to climb them all, but if all of those steps were like 3 feet high, I couldn't walk up those steps at all. But they didn't build it that way because they built it for normal people, and I'm normal in that context. So yes, I could climb those stairs. Let's get out of the limits that we've placed on what, first of all, what normal is. Maybe we just throw out the whole darn word. How about? What if we let go of the limits on what being human is and included each other and thought about each other in everything we're doing, in everything we're building, in everything that we're trying to connect with each other in. That's starting to live wholeness. That's starting to appreciate wholeness as this container for lots of different human ways of expressing. So yeah, let's use that pedestrian bridge as a great metaphor for how we don't have to do it wrong the first time and say, oh yeah, duh, and then rethink it. Although, congratulations for rethinking. Give yourselves credit for every time you gotta take a step back and rethink. And then each time we do that kind of exercise, maybe we get a little closer to really embracing each other. Really embracing all that everyone is. That's what I wish for us. I wish for us to recognize the wholeness that's the truth of who we are. It's the truth of who every human being is. It's the truth of spirit in action as all the bits and pieces of its creation. Every one of us and every exchange of energy and every thought that's thought, every feeling that's felt. That's the wholeness. That's what I want us to feel and live from. So we've got an affirmation for the week that's going to serve us well, I can tell. And that is, I recognize the wholeness of myself and everyone I need. And I'm hoping you'll repeat that with me, and then let's move into prayer. I recognize the wholeness of myself and everyone I need. And so, yes, opening up into that knowing that there is only one life, one wholeness, one allness, one goodness we call God. And knowing if it is all there is, then my life is lived inside it and made of it. And that same truth is true for every being, for everyone here in this room, for everyone listening, for everyone that's never heard of Science of Mind or Centers for Spiritual Living, but is living the life they know to live to the best of their ability with the tools they've been given, with the thoughts they think and the feelings they feel and the bodies they're living in. Every one of us is that. And it's trusting that as the underlying truth of all life, that allows me to speak this word, knowing there's power in this word, knowing there's possibility for newness, knowing there is opening to the power of living a whole life. That is what's happening here. I know and claim that the world is stepping into a new way of honoring and experiencing wholeness. I speak a word for the world stepping into a bigger way of loving. And I know that's happening one person at a time. I know and claim it starts with me. And I see and feel change rippling out. Nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be manipulated. All just requires the conscious awareness of the truth of wholeness, the truth of love, the truth of spirit, loving itself and living itself, right here, right now. And I'm so grateful for how good it feels to feel the feelings that come up as I speak these words. I'm so grateful for the change that ripples outward into manifest, experienced reality because I have spoken this word. And in that gratitude, right now, I simply let it go and I let it be. And together we say, and so it is.